Tonight, we're diving deep into the shadows. We're talking about the Shadow Man. I've always been fascinated by the unexplained. It all started with a simple email, a story so chilling it sent shivers down my spine. A young woman, let's call her Sarah, wrote to me about her grandmother's house. One night, that feeling turned into pure terror. That's when she saw it. If you want more spine-chilling stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. At the edge of her vision, a shadow moved. It wasn't the flickering kind caused by the dying embers. This shadow was solid, darker than the darkness itself. It seemed to ooze across the wall, growing taller, wider, taking on a vaguely human shape. Sarah sat frozen in place, her breath caught in her throat. Fear, raw and primal, gripped her, rooting her to the spot. She tried to convince herself it was just her imagination, a trick of the light. But deep down, she knew better. This was something else entirely. As she watched, the shadow detached itself from the wall. It glided towards her, silent and menacing. Sarah wanted to scream, to run, but her body refused to obey. It was like an invisible force held her captive. Her muscles turned to lead. Closer and closer the shadow came, until it was looming over her, a suffocating presence that seemed to drain the very air from her lungs. And then, as quickly as it appeared, the shadow was gone. The room was still dark, the silence broken only by the sound of Sarah's ragged breathing. She scrambled to her feet, fumbling for the light switch. When the room flooded with light, there was nothing there. No shadow, no intruder, no explanation. But Sarah knew what she had seen. She had looked into the eyes of the Shadow Man. Now, you all know I've seen some things in my time, traveling the country, investigating the paranormal, but some stories, they just stick with you. This next one, it's one of those stories. It came from a quiet little town called Hollow Creek. There on Harrington Street stood an old rambling house. It had been empty for years, windows boarded up, paint peeling. Locals whispered tales of a family torn apart by tragedy, but the whispers always circled back to the Shadow Man. One night, a group of teenagers decided to explore the abandoned house. They had no idea what they were walking into. Section 2. Whispers from the woods. Jessica brought her camcorder. To document their adventure, she hoped to catch a ghost. On film, as they crept through the house, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, Jessica felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She pointed the camcorder down a long, dark hallway. Then, Jessica saw a flicker of movement. A shadow, tall and thin, detached itself from the wall. She zoomed in, her hand trembling. The shadow solidified, taking on the shape of a man. Its limbs were too long, its movements too fluid. Too inhuman. A wave of terror washed over Jessica, almost making her drop the camcorder. Section 3. The Hospital Haunting. The teenagers continued their exploration, oblivious to the danger. They laughed and joked, their voices echoing, but Jessica felt they were being watched. The air grew colder, shadows pressed in. Then it happened. A blood-curdling scream pierced the night. The teenagers scattered, stumbling in their haste to escape, but for one of them it was too late. He vanished without a trace. The police searched, but found nothing. Some say he's still trapped with the Shadow Man. Others whisper of the Shadow Man appearing elsewhere. Hospitals, cemeteries, even homes, drawn to places of fear and despair. Section 1. Ancient origins. You all know when we're talking about something like the Shadow Man, we're not just talking about some spooky story told around a campfire. This thing, this entity, it's got roots that run deep. We're talking ancient primal fear, the kind that's been with humanity since we first huddled around flickering fires in the dark. Think about it. Every culture, every corner of the world has stories of shadowy beings, creatures that lurk at the edge of our vision, just beyond the reach of the firelight. In ancient Mesopotamia, they had Pazuzu, the king of the demons of the wind, often depicted as a grotesque humanoid figure with bird-like features. The Egyptians, they feared Amut, the devourer of souls, a terrifying chimera with the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. She was said to devour the hearts of those deemed unworthy by the gods, casting their souls into eternal darkness. Section 2. Whispers across cultures. And it didn't stop there, y'all. The Greeks, they had their tales of the Erinyes, also known as the Furies, vengeful goddesses of the underworld who pursued those who had committed heinous crimes. They were often depicted with wings, snakes for hair, and blood dripping from their eyes. Imagine seeing that in your nightmares. Even in Native American folklore, we find stories of shadow beings like the Cherokee legend of the Raven Mocker, a malevolent spirit that could shapeshift into a human form, often appearing as a frail old man. It was said to prey on the sick and dying, stealing their hearts and leaving behind only an empty shell. These stories, passed down through generations, they speak to something deep within us, a primal fear of the unknown, the unseen. It's like there's a part of us that's hardwired to be afraid of the dark, of what might be hiding there, just out of sight. Section 3. Modern manifestations. Now you might be thinking, okay, that's all well and good, but what about today? What about the shadow man sightings in modern times? Well, that's just it, folks. The stories haven't stopped. In fact, they seem to be increasing. With every passing year, more and more people come forward claiming to have encountered this dark entity. Some researchers believe that the shadow man is a type of interdimensional being, able to cross over into our world from some other plane of existence. Others speculate that it could be a manifestation of our own fears and anxieties, given form in the darkness. There's even a theory that the shadow man is some sort of psychic vampire, feeding off our negative energy, our fear and despair. And the more we fear it, the stronger it becomes. Section 4. The power of belief. But regardless of what the shadow man is, one thing is clear. It's a powerful symbol of the darkness that exists within ourselves and in the world around us. It's a reminder that there are things out there, things we may never fully understand, things that can hurt us, terrify us, even drive us mad. And sometimes, the scariest thing of all is not knowing what's real and what's not. Whether the shadows we see are just tricks of the light or something far more sinister. So, I ask you folks, do you believe? One of the most compelling pieces of this whole Shadow Man puzzle is the sheer volume of first-hand accounts. It's not just a handful of spooky stories, it's a chorus of voices, each one whispering about their own chilling encounters. And trust me, when you hear these stories, you can't help but feel the fear, the raw terror these folks experienced. Take, for instance, the story of Michael from Ohio. He described waking up in the dead of night, feeling a heavy presence in his room. He couldn't move, couldn't speak, like something was holding him down. And then he saw it, a tall, shadowy figure standing at the foot of his bed, its eyes glowing with an eerie red light. Then there's Sarah from California. She told me about seeing a similar figure lurking in the hallways of her grandmother's old Victorian home. She said it felt like it was feeding off her fear, growing stronger with every terrified breath she took. Now, what's truly fascinating, what sends shivers down my spine, is the common thread that runs through these stories. The witnesses, they come from all walks of life, different backgrounds, different parts of the world. But their descriptions of the Shadow Man, they're eerily similar. They talk about its height, its thin, almost skeletal frame, the way it seems to glide effortlessly through the darkness. And those eyes, those glowing red eyes, they're a recurring nightmare. It's like looking into the abyss itself, a void of pure malevolence. And the fear, it's not just your everyday fear, the kind you feel when you watch a scary movie. It's a deep, primal terror, a feeling of being hunted by something ancient and evil, something that wants to harm you, to drain you of your very life force. Another chilling detail that pops up time and again is this: sleep paralysis. Many witnesses report experiencing sleep paralysis during their encounters with the shadow man. They wake up in the middle of the night, unable to move or speak, their bodies frozen in place. And it's during these episodes that the shadow man appears, looming over them, its presence suffocating, terrifying. Now, some folks might try to explain this away as just a natural phenomenon, a glitch in the brain's sleep-wake cycle. But for those who have experienced it, especially in conjunction with seeing the shadow man, it's far more sinister, far more real. It's like they're caught between two worlds, the waking world and the realm of nightmares, and the shadow man is the gatekeeper. So, what does it all mean, y'all? Is the shadow man a demon, a ghost, an interdimensional being? Or is it something even more terrifying, something we can't even begin to comprehend? I don't have the answers, but I'm determined to keep searching, to keep listening to the voices from the shadows, to keep piecing together this terrifying puzzle. Because one thing's for sure, the shadow man is out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for its next victim. And until we understand what we're dealing with, none of us are truly safe. Now, you all know I've been to some creepy places in my time, places where the veil between our world and the next feels thin as a whisper. But there's something about the locations where the shadow man has been sighted that just sends chills down my spine. Abandoned hospitals, old asylums and cemeteries. These are the hunting grounds of the shadow man, folks. Places where the energy is heavy and the veil is worn thin. One place that stands out in my mind, a place that's practically synonymous with the shadow man, is the Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Kentucky. This abandoned tuberculosis sanatorium has a dark and tragic history, a breeding ground for despair and death. Thousands of people died within its walls, their bodies ravaged by disease, their spirits broken by suffering. And it's said that many of those souls never left. They're trapped there, y'all, caught between this world and the next. Their anguish a beacon for the shadow man. People who have dared to venture inside Waverly Hills tell stories of seeing shadowy figures lurking in the hallways, hearing whispers and moans echoing through the empty rooms. And then there are the encounters with the shadow man itself, those terrifying glimpses of a tall, dark figure with glowing red eyes, a harbinger of dread and despair. But here's the thing that really gets me thinking, folks. It's not just these haunted locations, these places steeped in death and sorrow, where the shadow man appears. It also seems to be drawn to individuals, to people who are going through their own personal darkness, people who are grieving a loss, struggling with depression, battling addiction, those who are most vulnerable, their spirits weakened by their own internal struggles. It's like the shadow man can sense that vulnerability, that crack in their defenses, and it exploits it, preying on their fear, feeding off their despair. And that's what makes the shadow man so terrifying, y'all. It's not just some external boogeyman, some monster lurking in the shadows. It's a reflection of the darkness that exists within us all, the potential for evil that resides in the deepest recesses of the human heart. So, what can we do about it, folks? How do we protect ourselves from something that seems to exist both within and without, something that feeds off our fear and despair? Well, I'll tell you this, running and hiding won't do any good. The shadow man, it thrives in the darkness, in the shadows of our doubts and fears. The only way to fight it is to confront it, to shine a light on the darkness within ourselves and in the world around us. We have to face our fears, acknowledge our vulnerabilities and find the strength to overcome them. We have to reach out to others, offer support to those who are struggling, and remind each other that we're not alone in the darkness. Because when we stand together, when we face our fears head-on, the shadows have nowhere to hide, and the shadow man, well, it loses its power over us. Y'all, We've travelled through some dark and twisted paths tonight, exploring the chilling world of the Shadow Man. We've heard the stories, seen the footage, and delved into the history and folklore surrounding this terrifying entity. But the question remains, what is the Shadow Man? Is it a demon, a ghost, a creature from another dimension, or is it something even more unsettling, a manifestation of our own darkest fears and anxieties given form in the shadows? The truth is, we may never know for sure. And maybe, just maybe, that's the scariest part of all. The world is full of mysteries, folks. Things we can't explain, things that go bump in the night. And sometimes it's best not to pry too deeply, not to tempt fate by shining a light into every dark corner. But here's the thing I keep coming back to, the thing that keeps me up at night. What if the Shadow Man is real? What if it's out there, right now, lurking in the shadows, feeding off our fear, waiting for its next victim? I'll tell you this, folks, I'm not taking any chances. I'm keeping the lights on, checking under the bed and saying a little prayer for protection every night. And if I ever see a tall, dark figure with glowing red eyes standing at the foot of my bed, well, let's just say I'll be running the other way. So until next time, you all stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember, sometimes the things we can't see are the things we should fear the most. Sweet dreams.